Hi guys, so I am late getting here, but I'm going to show you guys the food. Hello? So I'm going to turn this around, see if I can anyway. Let's see, here we go. So we are at Mr. Henry's for brunch today, and I'm going to show you guys what they have for brunch. There's salad, looks yummy, delicious. And over there is the head table, and this is the view of the restaurant. So I am late launching, but thanks for waiting. Hi, how are you doing? Oh, wow. And fruit. Awesome. Thank you, thank you. I love fruit. Thank you so much. That looks good too. Ooh, boy. And some veggies and tomato and put some of this. No, you go ahead. So normally we do Tuesday nights or evenings. So this is the first brunch that I've been to. So we're eating first, and then we will have Representative Karen Bass with the Congressional Black Caucus. So let's see what's to eat over here. I'll put my plate down. And we'll check out. Okay, so those are chicken tenders. Biscuits and gravy. I'm not really sure what that is. Maybe hash. That's pork. That's pork. That's bacon and sausage. Those are eggs. I don't know. No, I don't. I don't know what that is. Let me see. That looks like hash browns or cream or something. I don't know. I think I'm gonna go for a waffle. Yeah. How does it work? I guess he'll come back.
I think
he will be back. Yeah, he'll be back. So Richard's sitting at the head table, and next to him is Representative Karen Bass while I wait for waffles. And hi, we're going to have introductions. And you'll meet everybody in the room, and then Karen Bass will start speaking. So hang in there with us. So, my plate. There's my plate too. Hi, I went to get a waffle.
All right, I have a few people in front of you, but
Okay. You said you'll bring it? Hi.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, I'm sitting up front, I guess. Maybe I'll get some eggs there.
I have some more there.
So brunch in DC is like a really, really big thing. I did a scope about this before. People will go to brunch and they'll sit there for 4 or 5 hours. And they usually like have unlimited mimosas, things like that. Yeah. So, can you tell me what's in this dish right here?
It's a crab quiche.
Oh, a crab quiche. That I will try.
What's that?
This one. Oh, I don't know what that is. What's the,
I'll come tell you later.
okay, thanks.
All right, that's
So-
hash brown casserole.
Hash brown
Yes,
casserole.
that's how she. Hash brown.
And that's biscuits and
Biscuits
gravy?
and gravy.
Okay.
All right. Yes, it's gonna be on.
Okay, so,
I'm gonna put this here.
okay, crab quiche, I'm gonna try this.
It's primarily known for its history in with music. They still have musical nights here. And on the wall, you will see, as I pointed out, Roberta Flack's first album, First Take, which was recorded here. And if you look at the closest picture, you'll see those wooden panels that over there are also in the picture. So it has a certain, a certain historical value here. I've been asked also to mention that this brunch goes on every Sunday. So if you like what you see, you can please come back. And so we have some guests who will introduce themselves later on who came up from downstairs because they were so interested. You all look so friendly and appealing. So anyway, we usually start out with introductions. And so we will continue that tradition. I guess we can start at this table with Gabrielle. Yeah. So if I catch you with a mouthful, please. No, please stand. If everybody's like to Yes.
Hi everyone, I'm Gabrielle Brown. I'm the Communications Director for the Congressional Black Caucus, and I'm here with Chair Bass.
By the way, I wonder if we need this. Well, you have a cord. Is that that? Okay, well, never mind.
Sure.
Just speak loudly.
Okay, good afternoon, I think. Yeah. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Nikki Mayo. I am the immediate past president of the Baltimore Association of Black Journalists, and I am a multimedia journalist that's freelancing. So today, I am here for the Crisis Magazine.
Wonderful.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Kevin Harris. I'm the Executive Director of the Congressional Black Caucus.
Good afternoon. My name is Langford Wiggins. I do freelance writing in DC, covering arts and culture, and then I also have an organization where I help minority entry-level journalists, aspiring journalists, get internships and scholarships.
Hello, everyone. Zolan King-Arialis, just started as the Homeland Security correspondent for the New York Times.
Yes, he replaced another one of our regulars, Ron Nixon, who had that beat, is now working for the AP.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Riko Yuki. I'm from University of Tokyo, but studying 1 year at Johns Hopkins University. I got interested in journalism and after coming to the US and living in Baltimore and so many race and ethnicity issues are going on, and it made me aware that journalism maybe awful way. And I really wanted to talk to you guys who are putting focus on how minorities can make more this, and I'm so excited to be here. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Blaine Alexander. I'm a correspondent for NBC News Channel, so I cover the White House and the Hill and the Supreme Court and all things Washington for all of our NBC stations around the country. And I'm glad to be here.
All right.
Hi, I'm Marita Coley, President and CEO of Multicultural Media, Telecom, and Internet Council. We focus on broadband and internet policy and ownership of the media, telecom, and tech industries. I'm also formerly BET and the old BET from the Bob Johnson days, and very happy to be here.
And they just concluded a great conference with us, and I saw J.C. Watts and all the SEC commissioners. And, yes, he's behind this, right, the Black News Network, which he says is going to start in November. And he told me also that the news director is, he was the general manager of WJLA here, Channel 7. His name will come in a second. But anyway, so she's a good person to know.
Good afternoon, I'm Dr. Philip Rukins. I'm a clinical social worker. I work in the area of diversity. I'm on faculty at Howard University School of Social Work and also the National Ethics Committee for the National Association of Social Workers.
And he just happened to see us. Right. Come on up here to the buffet. So come on.
Hey,
My name is Louis Hicks. I'm the Director of Grants for Humanities DC. We're the state agency for National Endowment for the Humanities.
Okay. By the way, the name I was thinking of is Gary Wardlaw, who's some of you may remember, who was the general manager of Channel 7. Oh, really? Well, all right. Well, of course.
Hi, my name is Ivan Perman. I'm a freelance journalist, do communications on immigration issues, and I also, as former executive director of the National Association of Hispanic Journalists.
Okay. Okay, okay.
Good afternoon, I'm Terry Shaw. I work as an editor of Journal-isms.
Is everybody here, Terry? No.
Terry Shaw, former editor of Washington Post and now a Spanish interpreter.
Okay. All right, how about Benita?
Good afternoon, I'm Benita Bing, president of the Exposure Group African American Photographers Association. I also work at the Senate as a network operations specialist.
And George?
Oh. I'm George. That's all you need to know. Wait.
Go to the post office for a rest.
So George is the photographer for our session before, and he also was a photographer for the U.S. Senate.
He was the first and only black African American Senate photographer.
There you go. All right. Thank you, George. Okay, Ed. Morning.
My name is Ed Lake. I'm a freelance writer.
And I'm English Sturgis, Ed's wife, and I teach journalism at Howard University, and I'm also a PhD candidate in higher education leadership at Howard University.
Ain't you?
You know.
And the two journalism interns who you may have met last roundtable come from Ingrid's class. Thank you.
If you need interns, let me know. I've got some.
Excellent.
You guys hear that?
Yes.
Okay, Lynn.
I'm Lynn Adrian. I'm the director of the BC Graduate Program in Broadcast and Digital Journalism for the Newhouse School at Syracuse University. I'm also on the advisory committee for the Powership project by the museum and the Freedom Digital intern.
Okay, Janice.
Yes, sir.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm Janice Temple, and I do social media. So I'm doing this on YouTube Live, and Richard shared it out. So.
Right. Thank you, Janice.
You're welcome.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Hazel Trice-Edney, editor-in-chief of the Trice-Edney Newswire, president and CEO. Hey, Lottie. President and CEO of Trice-Edney Communications. I am also an adjunct professor at the Kathy Hughes School of Communications at Howard University.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Don Baker. I'm president and CEO of the Don Baker Photography Group. I'm also an identical twin brother, so some of y'all see us all over town. There's probably at least two of us. He's a photographer as well. So we've been covering the Congressional Black Caucus since 1974. We have a lot of history there.
All right.
Carl Stewart, formerly with San Francisco Chronicle, Oakland Tribune, Florida A&M University, Howard University, Xavier University, mostly West Coast stuff.
Good afternoon. I'm Darlene Superville, and I cover the White House for the Associated Press, and I'm also the treasurer of the local chapter of NAPJ.
Good afternoon, I'm Ron Taylor. I'm a veteran journalist around with a bunch of papers.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Too many. And right now, I'm a fellow at Morgan State University's School of Global Journalism and Communication. Working with
I'm Dorothy Tucker. I happen to be in DC this weekend for a girls' weekend, and then I heard about this, so I pushed my flight back. I am an investigative reporter with CBS 2 in Chicago, and the vice president of broadcast for NBC.
I'm Joe Davidson. I'm a columnist for the Washington Post and a co-founder of the National Association of Black Journalists.
I'm Fred Sweets of the St. Louis American newspaper, the finest black weekly in these United States.
Yay!
And I love every photographer in this group.
I'm Powell, and many of you know me from CBS News or FDR or the museum. I am now the director of Washington programs with the Annenberg Center for Communications and Policy at the University of Southern California.
Hi, Don.
Who's next? Flo? Oh, start Marcia.
Good afternoon, I'm Flo Purnell. I am managing editor at Think Tank on the Institute for Defense Analysis in Alexandria, Virginia, where I worked at. USA Today, NPR, Merge Magazine as managing editor, People, and the rest of my
Hi, I am Lottie Joyner, editor of the Crisis Magazine, which is the publication of the NAACP, former assistant editor for Emerge.
Right.
Hi, I'm Marcia Davis of the Marshall Project.
Hi, Diane Williams, independent journalist.
And one of the organizers of Roundtable.
Former soccer art collector in the Washington Post. Still have a gig comedy job there. You take this next page and so keep writing all these posts. And a guide for students and teachers to take news as truth and will prevail.
And Carol designed the logo for the Roundtable. Goes right up with the email. Thank you, Carol.
Hi, I'm Kamal Uheim, a features editor at the and formerly managing editor of the Afro.
All right. Okay, Paul, it's your turn. I already told him about the history of the Star and Mr. Henry.
Paul Delaney, most of my career at the New York Times.
Okay, and I'm Richard Prince, and I write a column about diversity issues in the news business called Journal-isms. I hope everybody yes, I did. Oh, sorry. Yeah. Can I have the microphone, please?
Yes.
All right, I said that my name is Richard Prince. Good. And I write a column about diversity issues in the news business called Journal-isms. And I hope that everybody reads it and becomes a news source for it. Thank you. Now, I think we got everybody. I didn't want to miss anybody. Okay. Now, Rico, in my email, I think you might have seen a letter that, or email that Rico wrote to me about how she is from Japan and she was in Baltimore, and she wanted to know more about our diversity issues in our business. So I thought I would give her some time now to ask whatever questions she wanted to see what responses we can come up with. So I'll give you the floor.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing your time. I have 3 questions, I guess. First, mainly, it's it was surprising and inspiring for me to see minorities get together and speak up as a journalist as well, like this. Because in Japan, we are said to be realized to be a homogeneous society, and when it comes to journalism, it's more about reporting facts and not really making opinions. But here it seems quite different. So how do you find being as a minority and having identities? How do you find the power of journalism in these issues? And second thing is it's quite general, but how come like you get into journalism? Like what do you find interesting in this industry? And the third thing is that like, do you find it like difficult or like very productive to get together with majority people and like majority populations to like provoke, how can I say, provoke social issues, and like how do you find the cooperation between minorities and majorities in US in journalism? Thank you.
Who wants to answer any of those questions? Well, the last one is, how do African Americans and journalists get along with, right, the quote unquote majority? All right, Joe, go ahead.
I don't have an answer, but one thing I'd like to do is frame it a bit. You know, I'm one of those who don't think we should consider ourselves minority.
Yeah, speak up.
I'm saying I don't think we should consider ourselves minority to begin with. It certainly, because it depends how you define the population. You're right. I mean, if you're in Montana, then clearly black folks, brown folks, minority. Until recently, at least in D.C., we were the majority. My home in Detroit, we're far and away the majority. So it wouldn't make sense to us as minorities. And so to begin with, I'd encourage you to develop a frame that doesn't simply label us as minorities.
Sorry.
And then a lot of these other things will flow from that.
And at the same time, if I may, the Black Press, which was founded, the first black newspaper, Freedom's Journal, in 1827, is sort of unique. We love to call ourselves black. It's, you know, we don't even say minority. And that's specifically because we write for and on behalf of black people in order to further the cause. The first mantra was we wish to plead our own cause. For too long have others spoken for us. And so that has continued through black newspapers, including the St. Louis. Ever since 1827, it's still going. More than 200 black newspapers, actually it's more than 250 black newspapers still in the U.S. And then, as you know, lots of magazines, etc. The reason I started in journalism and continued in the black press, I started with the black press, I'm still a black press woman, is because I love the fact that in journalism you can make an impact. You can change people's lives. You can make a difference in someone's life. And so with me, every story should not just educate, but actually make an impact and make change. It's the truth to power.
Do you have like any specific experiences that you found like, I made like impact?
Yes, I've written several stories in my day that changed the course of someone's life in prison, for example. One time they called me the prison reporter because I was doing so many jail-based stories. But one story, and specifically a guy named Troy Hopkins, was in prison for a murder that he did not commit. And I stayed on that story, wrote more stories on that than any other journalist. And eventually the governor of Virginia declared him absolute innocence. And they gave him a lot of money and his girlfriend. And so those are the kinds of things that we aim to do. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else have, what was your first question? I forgot what the first question was.
Oh, it's like, it was like surprising and inspiring for me that like minorities get together and like focus on those issues as a journalist. Because like in Japan, like it's more about, it's not like journalists like should be more neutral and like not putting their identity in front. So like how come like it's so different?
Oh, because it was written into the Constitution.
Yes, it's called the First Amendment.
Yeah, I think it's really different society, but like Japan is also like changing right now, like having more diverse population, like welcoming like foreign laborers and also. So like I found like US example would be like quite insightful Japan. When we change society, like still people have like we are like homogeneous, like a kind of common sense, which is not true.
Yeah. Well, there was an organization called Unity that
in which the black journalists, Asian American journalists, Hispanic journalists, and Native American journalists got together, and when they began, they were surprised at how much they had in common as people of color. Then they changed the name, Journal of Color. So it's just the way the United States was created, especially the African American, 3/5 of the first clause, and then all throughout the history of the country, Hispanics experience Asian Americans differently, and of course Native Americans have, and so have Asian Americans. So one of the things, we can't spend much time on this, but I recall the Japanese internment is still talked about very much here in terms of reparations. And somebody came out with a book recently about how the press covered the whole Japanese issue, Japanese American issue. And one of the things that was noticeable was that in the West, where they were going to place these internment camps, the news media focused on how many jobs would be created, rather than the fact that this was not constitutional. So, each of those, and the Chinese Exclusion Act, of course, was when we had our discussion recently about the whole border issue. Someone, I've forgotten who it was, said that, this whole issue about immigration and other people has been going on since the Chinese Exclusion Act in the last 2 centuries ago, the 1800s. So, all this stuff is a function of our American history. So, all right, Lynn.
I think there's a similarity in our experience to some degree in that there has been an effort throughout American history to create the melting pot, and that there's only one American narrative, and that the other stories that don't fit into that narrative get buried. And we know from our experience that there are stories that need to be told to get the whole picture of what's going on, and that probably is going to be happening more in Japan as its population diversifies, especially since it's been such a homogenous population for so long, and there's going to have to be a fight to reveal and tell a more complete picture of what's going on, and by gathering strength from each other, so that you know that you're not alone, will be some of the way that those stories rise to the level of attention.
Okay, thank you very much. After that answers some of your questions. Do you have other questions for individual people?
Thank you so much.
Okay, very good. Okay, delighted to have, and I just found out recently about the trip to Eritrea, but since the Democrats have taken control of the House, there's so much news from the House of Representatives and from the Democrats there, and interspersed with all that is, of course, the continuing drama of what's happening with African Americans under the Trump administration. So, in light of all that, what is the Congressional Black Caucus? How do they define their mission in this particular time, 2019?
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for the invitation to come here and speak with you today. And I know that many of you, as I listen to the introductions, have been in the DC area a lot longer than I have. I'm in my 5th term, which means my 9th year here. But just a little bit of info on the Black Caucus now. We were talking about the caucus in the beginning in 1974. In 2019, there's 55 members of the Black Caucus. 5 members chair full committees, which is huge. Benny Thompson, Homeland Security; Maxine Waters, Financial Services; Eddie Bernice Johnson, Science, Space and Technology; Bobby Scott, chairing Education and Labor. Republicans always change that committee name to Workforce because they don't like the word labor, but he's changed it back to labor. And Elijah Cummings, of course, chairing Government Reform and Oversight. 20 members of the Congressional Black Caucus chair subcommittees of various committees. 3 members of the Black Caucus, Mr. Clyburn is the majority whip, Hakeem Jeffries is the Democratic chair, and Barbara Lee is the co-chair of Steering and Policy. So 3 members in top positions. And by the way, there are 235 Democrats, so 55, because all of us are Democrats this time around, 55 out of 235 really positions the Congressional Black Caucus to be a very powerful force within the overall Democratic caucus. But one of the things that has driven me crazy from day one about the Black Caucus is that people in general, outside of the bubble here, don't know what the Black Caucus does. So there's two things that's always said about the Black Caucus. One, what does the Black Caucus do? Two, the Black Caucus doesn't do anything. So it's my goal as chair by December 2020 for Black America to know what the Black Caucus does, and for the Black Caucus to demonstrate how we use our power to impact the daily lives of African Americans and everybody in the United States. So my experience in the Black Caucus, we religiously, faithfully meet every Wednesday at 12 o'clock. We have lunch, and it's kind of like being at your grandmother's house. You got your crazy uncle over in the corner. You're not speaking to this person, and you love that person. But we faithfully meet every Wednesday, and my experience from the very beginning was I would sit at these lunches, and people would just make these kind of offhanded comments that really amounted to unbelievable accomplishments that individual members were making, and but not telling anybody about it. So, a couple of examples that I've used a lot lately was at the end of last year, sitting and listening to a couple of members who are on the Agriculture Committee talk about how they got $50 million in the Ag Bill for scholarships for historically Black colleges and universities. And they just kind of said it casually, but there's no major piece of legislation that the Black Caucus has not had impact on. Whether you were talking about the Affordable Care Act and all of the legislation related to disparities in health, if you're talking about Dodd-Frank, I mean, you can go on and on. But so it's my hope that by December of 2020, we will communicate this in every form possible, on every platform possible, to Black America. We started off the year, we had a retreat, we commissioned a poll, really kind of to demonstrate this. And of course, people are familiar with the term Congressional Black Caucus, unless you're really a certain age, and then, you're not at all. But not really knowing, what we do. And then when we asked African Americans around the country, what is the most pressing issue for you? I mean, there's a lot of issues that you would, suspect, criminal justice reform, voting rights, all that. But wealth creation was number one. And if you think about that, considering the hits that we took in the last Great Recession, that makes lots of sense. I mean, the Black community lost tremendous wealth, primarily through home ownership. But anyway, that was number one on their minds. And so we do have a strategy, which I can get into in a minute, about how we want to address by 2020 for Black America to know what the Congressional Black Caucus does.
Okay. What about your trip to Eritrea? I'm so fortunate, since we're journalists, we're also interested in the repression of
Black bear?
Yes, I know. I'm a traditionalist. Anyway, I'm still working. Oh, sorry. I said that I was interested in the trip that she and some of her colleagues took to Eritrea, and I wanted to find out more about that, particularly though because Eritrea and Ethiopia are some of the most repressive governments for the press, and I wondered whether that ever came up.
So I also forgot to mention that for the first time in history, we have two Africans that are members of the Congressional Black Caucus. One, who you've heard about all week, Ilhan Omar, who was born in Somalia, left Somalia when she was 8, and spent 4 years in Kenya in a refugee camp, and has been here in Minnesota. And then Joe Neguse, whose parents were Eritrean refugees. That is why we went to Eritrea. So I told her we couldn't go to Somalia, but anyway, I wanted to very much, the second they won their election, take them to Africa, because one of my responsibilities on the Hill, and one of the reasons I ran for Congress, was really to impact U.S.-Africa relations. And so I chair now the Subcommittee on Africa, Global Health, Human Rights, and International Organizations. Ilhan Omar is on the committee with me. And so I wanted to take them for the opening session of the African Union. I didn't get to do that, but I took them to Ethiopia anyway for a few reasons. First of all, the African Union is in Ethiopia. It's in Addis Ababa. And by the way, you saw that plane crash today, which really, I mean, last week I was on Ethiopian Airlines, and it was really one of the nicest, best airlines on the continent. So don't let that crash deter you from flying Ethiopia Airlines. But Ethiopia has a new prime minister who I hope that we can bring to Congress. He is a wonderful, exciting young man. He's 47 years old. He's the Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed, but they use the first name. Since he's been in, there's a woman president, there's a woman chief justice of the Supreme Court. He's appointed 50% of his cabinet as women. He immediately established peace with Eritrea. He opened up freedom to the press, by the way, so that is no longer the case. He opened up the prisons and released the political prisoners. And establishing peace with Eritrea is really critical because that's one of the reasons, excuses, however you want to describe it, that Eritrea has used for some of its closed society. But, you know, we tend to, in the United States, pass, black or white judgment on countries, and we don't have much to say now, okay? I mean, especially in regard to corruption, nepotism, incompetence. We're kind of quite embarrassing internationally. I'm sure all of you travel and you know that. Oh my God. Right, yeah, you're constantly apologizing or explaining, right? Anyway, what I didn't know what to expect in going to Eritrea. The main reason why I wanted to go was because it was Joe Negus's home and because peace had been established. And so I go to Eritrea, and one of the reasons why there's so many refugees from Eritrea is because they have a system there called national service, which we would call, like, after you finish school, the draft. Although it's not all military, okay? But everybody's required to do national service. Now, one of the problems is you go into national service, but you don't know when it's going to end. And so some people have been in national service for 10 years, 20 years, 18 months. And so a lot of people have left because of that. So one of the main reasons why they did this was because they were always on a war footing with Ethiopia. Now that peace has been established, we are hopeful that Eritrea will reconsider the policy. So one of the reasons why I went to Eritrea is because it's important that the United States send an encouraging message. The same reason I went to Zimbabwe a year ago and did election monitoring after Mugabe stepped down. But what I found in Eritrea is a very clean country. Free education to its population from primary through college, health care that's free. So, you know what I mean? I mean, we haven't figured out how to do those two things, okay? So I just think that it's time to take a new look and to not base our policies going forward based on everything that happened in the past. Now, I'm criticized a lot when I travel to Africa because one of the things that I've learned is there's virtually no diaspora that's in love with their country. And so, I was certainly criticized for going to Eritrea. And I'm criticized because when I go to Africa, I often meet with the leadership, the heads of state of a country. I didn't meet with the president of Ethiopia, but I did meet with a number of leaders of the country. But, again, in the role that I play in Congress, I can't just shut my door down to an individual prime minister or president because we don't like their policies or because they're repressive. Well, that's that.
Okay, very good. Okay,
Okay, two quick questions. First, I read somewhere, I think last night, and forgive me if I have the number wrong, but it's something like 5 to 7 members of the Black Caucus are have constituencies that are majority white. 5. Okay, so how do you, is it difficult to pull them in on black issues, or is there a pullback saying, well, I gotta pay attention? So how do you work with them? And the second, okay, so the second question is pertaining to, in the past, you've had black Republicans as members of the Black Caucus. I know you weren't chair, but how do you?
Oh, no, I was there. Well, me alone.
You were there, right?
Yeah.
But you weren't.
I wasn't chair.
You weren't chair yet.
So-
So how do you work with that? I mean,
Well,
do
we
you have
just
to keep a
have-
secret what you're talking about, or?
No, well, we don't have any right now. I mean, Will Hurd is African American and Tim Scott. Now, some are in the Black Caucus too. You know, Corey and Kamala are active members of the Congressional Black Caucus.
Right.
Tim Scott has just chosen not to. He's our friend, but he's just didn't choose. I came in with Tim, and he just didn't want to be a part of the Black Caucus. That's fine.
Right.
And then Will Hurd from Texas is African American in the House. He's the only Republican African American. He's our friend. He just chooses not to be in the caucus. When Mia Love was there, it was fine. We did, though, when we had to talk internal Democratic caucus stuff, we adjourned the CBC and went into the Democratic caucus. How about that? But, you know, Mia was quite close, so Mia was quite close to a number of us. So Mia would just get up and leave, because she knew it was like, okay, they're getting ready to talk family business, I gotta go.
Okay, Terry.
Since I'm no longer a journalist, I can express my opinion. As a faithful Democrat, it pains me when fellow Democrats stoop to the level of our president in their rhetoric. And I would really beg you to encourage your colleagues when they go low, go high, and to treat everyone with respect and not make these inflammatory statements about the president and about Republicans and just a request.
Okay. I mean,
You know, with respect to particularly Representative Omar, who has said some things that are really unacceptable.
Okay. All right, who's next? No more questions? Okay, that wasn't over.
Sorry.
Ron, yes, sir. Okay, Carl, you down.
Given the involvement of foreign governments in, or the attempt by foreign nations to meddle in our elections, what can caucus do to make itself heard and to defend black people who, I mean, many of whom, sacrificed heavily for the right to vote?
You're referring to like the Facebook stuff that was encouraging black people not to vote? Is that what you're referring to?
2016 and 2018.
Yeah. So, you know, I believe that the answer to that is the same answer for how we deal with voter suppression. Because, and we know that has taken place all over, especially the South, but a lot of different states. And to me, the onus is on all of us to increase our organizing. And I think that absolutely happened, which is why I believe Stacey Abrams really is the real governor of Georgia. She wasn't allowed to be the governor, but you know, you look at the turnout that happened there, and you talk about some of the states where the voter suppression is the highest. And we have organized, I'm not saying that we now as the Congressional Black Caucus, Congressional Black Caucus certainly participated, but there's just been tons of organizing around the country. I mean, that's the one thing, when we reflect back 10 years from now, when this guy is long gone, you know, one of the things I do believe that will be said about this time period is that he was the catalyst for an unbelievable amount of activism. And that's my true background, which is why I identify a lot with some of our new younger members that have come in. The majority of my life was spent on the outside, organizing and pressuring people like me. Now, never imagining I'd be on the inside, but we have had just a tremendous amount. I mean, you know, yes, we took back the House of Representatives, but if you look at the elections that have taken place since Trump's election, over 300 state seats. You know, we flipped legislatures, you know, 9 governors. So I think that when you have Russian interference, when you have voter suppression, use that as an organizing tool to motivate folks. And one thing about black folks, you make us mad, that makes us vote. I mean, you know, when there is voter suppression, or when we saw the stuff that was happening with President Obama, you know, we were upset and we turned out. We need to do a lot more, and we need to be consistent. My problem with us, and now I'm talking about just the greater country, is that, you know, our American culture is not a culture that is actively involved in politics. We're a relatively apolitical society. We know about every football team, we know about every celebrity, we have no idea who our member of Congress is, what they do. Or anything else. And so I am hoping that we'll look back in history and say that Trump led to a cultural change. And we recognize that he was so horrific that we cannot ever relax again and have to be involved civically and understand that civic participation is much, much more than voting.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I noticed in the last couple of weeks there's been a lot of publicity around some of the hearings, and the other day the Homeland Security Secretary, the hearing that went on there, I was just so impressed with our African American congressional representatives and the way that they very sternly but respectfully, for the most part, but seriously, just used very strong terms to deal with this woman.
The children in cages?
The children in cages, and just also exposing her dishonesty, flat out lies that she was putting forth. Anyway, my point being that it seems now, and maybe you can tell me if this just appears that way because you have more power in the House, but it appears that there's a much tougher way of handling these situations. That there seems to be, and also kind of an organized effort to really bear down in a tougher way.
That is definitely called power.
Yeah.
Because, you know, remember, for the last 2 years, which is why I don't think the president is ready for what's coming for him. Because, you know, first of all, he's never had to be accountable for a day in his life. And then he gets this position, the most accountable position on the planet. And for the last 2 years, he's had free reign. And so we haven't had oversight hearings. We haven't been able to question in the way that you see us question now. So yes, you are looking at organization, and you are looking at Democrats utilizing their power.
And the videos are viral because it's great.
And one is on Pearl's site on Facebook, if you want to look it up.
It's been shared many times now, so, but it just seems as though, and whether it's more or the same as before, there's more exposure.
You know, and for our guest from Japan, if you want to see race, so look at this whole issue that is happening on the border. And quiet as it's kept, you do know that there are thousands of black folks on that border too. Africans, Caribbeans, you know, Central Americans. There are black Central American countries called Guyana, you know. I mean, but any Belize, you know, so, but what is getting the attention is the folks from Central America. But I think we're going to look back at this, and this is on the order of the Japanese internment camps. I mean, because we have to understand that they don't know where these children are. They don't know how many children, they don't know where they are. They've essentially turned them loose, and in a minute they're going to put them on the market. Some of those children will never see their parents again. They will terminate parental rights and put them up for adoption. One of the main issues I work on, by the way, is the nation's foster care system. And I have an MSW, by the way. And I work on immigration for the other guy. You know, I work on the nation's foster care system because the majority of the kids in foster care are our kids, and it's the feeder system to the prison system. Because we kick them to the curb when they turn 18, and then we wonder why, you know, if you did a survey of people in prison, a huge percentage started in the child welfare system. So now you are using this system to punish people as opposed to protect children. And when 10, 20 years from now these kids go and try to find their parents, you know, by the way, the federal government is not responsible for reunification. So I'm doing legislation to make the federal government responsible, but also to say that the family should be awarded damages, because the separation of these children will create lifelong emotional and psychological problems.
They will shine on us.
Okay, Don.
Yeah. As everyone knows, next month, we're coming up on the 25th anniversary of the election of President Mandela. And I was just reading today about the land that many of the poor people are building huts on, and they're in wine country.
Oh, yeah, it's the front page of the New York Times.
Yeah, and so wine country. Yeah, some of the wine country. About, I think they said about 80% of the public land is still owned by the original white Afrikaners.
Right.
And so my question to you is about, is this being, any of this being taken up? Like I said, we're 25 years out. Some of these land deals were made for 50 years from that time, from time of Mandela. And so I'm just wondering, has this come to the attention of the Congressional Black Caucus on your trips to Africa?
Yeah, absolutely, it has. And, you know, whether we can get involved in exactly how they work that out, where we can play a role is when they start confiscating some of that land, and then you have this outrage that happens, and we need to be there to say why if the land does get confiscated. I know that South Africa is going to handle it different than Zimbabwe. You know, Mugabe didn't handle it very well. And then after the land was confiscated, then, you know, folks didn't know what to do with the land. So I'm hoping that Ramaphosa will deal with it in a much better way. But I'm going to tell you something. I mean, did you see who he appointed as the ambassador of South Africa? See, this is the kind of stuff you have to run around and apologize for. Now, everybody in here knows the U.S. history in terms of apartheid. I ran an anti-apartheid organization in the 70s and 80s. We were on the wrong side in apartheid until there was a movement that forced our government to be on the right side. So Trump appointed a woman to be the ambassador to South Africa, who I believe her primary you know, reason for being there is because she's a dues-paying member to Mar-a-Lago. She is, and this is the height of insult, a white South African. And professionally, she is known for making purses. She sells purses. I'm not sure if anybody in the room could afford her purses. You know, they cost $10,000, $15,000. That's who we have appointed to South Africa, and that's really significant because can you imagine the message that sends to the South Africans?
And they know it.
Okay, Carol.
So be prepared to write if it gets confiscated in the defense of the South African government.
On the list. Very quickly, an item that speaks a little bit closer to my home here in Washington, D.C. I was born and raised here. My father was a real estate broker. In the 50s, he could only sell 2 blocks in black neighborhoods. I've seen a cycle of change in this city, and I was wondering, what can we do, or can you speak to the issue of flipping in neighborhoods?
You mean gentrification?
Pardon?
Gentrification?
Yes, flipping houses. Gentrification, yes.
Because it's not just flipping houses.
Well,
I think I know what you mean. Yes.
Legislation and things in urban governments that allow developers to go in, knock out any kind of historic preservation. I went to Lincoln Temple United Church of Christ in 11th and R. It was chartered in 1867. The church is shuttered. I know some of these developers are going to turn around that legislation and build probably condos.
So, well, I live in Southwest. I live right next to Fort McNair.
Yeah.
And one of the things I like about the neighborhood is it's mixed, right? I mean, there's housing projects, right? By where I live, apartments, and
That's continuing by accident.
well, let me just tell you something that I'm worried about. I'm worried about that soccer stadium. Because that soccer stadium was built and there's no parking.
Where they're gonna park it.
Exactly. I mean, there's no parking. How do you build a stadium and no parking? So, to me, what I worry about is all those folks that live around the soccer stadium, in between the soccer stadium and the baseball stadium. And there's still a lot of black folk that live there. I mean, one of the things, you know, I thought I was coming to Chocolate City.
RFK Stadium,
Right. So I'm not even talking about RFK Stadium. Oh, yeah, but it's right. So that's not I mean, it would be wonderful if it was a federal issue, and I'm sure that there might be a few things that we could do. Our HUD secretary, I'm sure, will be leading the way. But gentrification is an issue in all of our communities around the country. Where I live in Los Angeles is, massively changing. And I mean, you talk about the 5 members of CBC that represent predominantly white constituencies. I don't know, there might be 2 or 3 CBC members who represent communities that are overwhelmingly African American. None of us do. I mean, my district is 30, 30, 30, 10, the 10% being Asian. But anyway, it is a big issue. It is a city issue. And so mayors are getting together around the country. So at the annual legislative conference, there was a big workshop on gentrification. So the federal piece of it is not really clear to me. I know that it's a Maxine Waters committee that deals with housing. But we also need to look at things like opportunity zones, because that was a good idea that was passed with basically little regulation, which will lead to a distorted, it will accelerate what you just said if it's left without regulation.
We have Mr. Bestos coming from Virginia.
Just
There you go.
an historical note is that a lot of the gentrification in DC, particularly in the Southwest, was prompted by the federal government. Okay, wait, Yvonne, yeah, then. Okay.
I've noticed, I don't know if this is the way the media has framed it, but I've noticed that among the new Congress people, there's a lot of cross-ethnic relationships. What do you see in terms of relationships between the Congressional Black Caucus and the Congressional Hispanic Caucus? Has there already been a long-term relationship there?
Yes.
And what do you see as the potential now that the Democrats are in power?
Thank you, I appreciate that. It's one of the things that I hope to work on. There has historically been a tri-caucus, which is the Black, Latino, and Asian caucus. The Asian caucus, by the way, is open to everyone. I'm actually a member of the Asian caucus. But, and I think they did that historically because their numbers were small. Their numbers are growing now. But we do work together. I am hoping, though, that we work together much closer. I mean, as I was coming up as a young activist, we called it different. Now it's called multiculturalism, but those of you in the room will know what I mean when I said we called it third world unity. We always worked together. We always worked in solidarity with each other's issues. And where you see us come together now is on the issue of immigration. Now, immigration is an issue that easily could divide us, and certainly, Trump tried to do that. He's tried to do that by talking about how much he loves African Americans. Every time he talks about the African American employment rate, like he had something to do with it. He had nothing to do with it. But anyway, are talking about, the reasons why black folks, have issues is because of Latinos. And I've been so proud of our people because our people have not taken on to that narrative. One, because he's so overtly anti-African American, but also because we just haven't. And some of the most vocal people around what's happening at the border, especially to the children, as you were describing, were our members of the CBC. But in immigration, there's ways that you could divide us by talking about DACA and not talking about TPS, or what Trump has tried to do, and the Republicans, is to eliminate the family unification and diversity visas. Diversity visas is the primary way that black folks and Asians come into the United States. And one of the things that I say to folks who aren't inclined to see things from a unity perspective is if you want to see the black population increase in the United States, it is going to be through immigration. I live in California. The Latino population didn't increase because folks had bunches of babies. It increased because of immigration. So immigration is in our best interest as well. And I think as black folks, we do need to understand and recognize our diversity more. So this is the 400th anniversary of our arrival on this continent. And, when the transatlantic slave trade was taking place, there were more of us that were delivered in Latin America and South America than there were in the United States. So I think it's an education process. but I think our unity is critical. As I mentioned, there are 55 members of the Black Caucus. If you add together the Black Caucus, the Asian Caucus, and the Latino Caucus, the Asians in the Asian Caucus, not like me, it's 128 out of 235. It's called math.
Interesting. Well, Lane.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being here. I wanted to ask a question about the upcoming 2020 election, which everybody's looking at. Obviously, 2 members of your caucus
That's right.
have their hats in the ring. So I specifically wanted to ask about the CBC's endorsement. One, will the CBC be making an endorsement? What will that look like? When will that come out? How will that decision process be made? And then specifically, have you decided who you're supporting?
No, no, and no. So one thing about the Congressional Black Caucus is that they're actually 4 separate organizations. And so one of the organizations is the organization that would endorse, which is the Political Action Committee. The Congressional Black Caucus actually never does an official endorsement, but with 2 members of our caucus, you know, running, it's tough one, extra tough for me. My senator is one of those 2, and I'm excited. But I think you're going to find members of the caucus kind of all over the map. You will find when Biden jumps in that there will be members of the caucus that will be very excited about that. So it will be interesting. I suspect that the caucus PAC will not make an endorsement in the primary. I suspect that.
Right.
That's my guess.
Okay, Lottie.
I wear glasses now.
Join the club.
Join the club. Earlier, a few of the things that Trump has eliminated. Could you talk a little bit about some of the rights and protections that African Americans and minorities have lost under the Trump administration that the lay person really doesn't know about, but will have an effect on us or will impact us?
Well, off the top of my head, let me answer it in kind of general forms, because I don't have a list in front of me. But essentially, the assault on civil rights, almost every cabinet secretary that he appointed, he gave them a mission of destroying and dismantling the agency that they were in charge of. And most of those agencies have civil rights areas. So if you're talking about education, if you're talking about the Environmental Protection Agency, if you're talking about Health and Human Services, if you're talking about the Department of Justice. So it's the elimination or the watering down of civil rights protections across the board. Now, one of the things he did right away within a couple of weeks of being sworn in was to reverse the consent decrees from police departments. So that's, you know, right there. All of the voter suppression stuff that's just been allowed to run amok. So it's hard. I mean, I could certainly get you more specific information, but that is a general way of looking at it. So environmental protection is huge in our communities because, I mean, you know, you can go back to the Flint water, but loosening up regulations when it comes to the environment disproportionately impacts our neighborhoods. For example, in Los Angeles, this might be a little different now, but a few years ago, the leading cause of death of Black children was asthma. Asthma, why? Because they live near freeways. It was the toxins in the air. And then when cap and trade kind of came in, which was meant to help the environment, you know that part of the way that works is that if I'm a polluter, then I put in money to allow myself to continue polluting by buying trees someplace else. You know, understand what I'm saying? So even in an environmentally aggressive state like California, you still have disproportionate impacts in communities of color. In the Central Valley in California, which is predominantly Latino, there's a really high miscarriage rate. Why? Because of chemicals in the water. So when he reduces regulations in those areas, then it disproportionately impacts. And then in immigration, of course, you know, I mean, there's the story. Where was that story that you sent me today about the Liberian woman? Where was that? Was it in the Washington Post?
It was in the Washington Post. I'm not sure where she was from.
Oh, and her country was Liberia, which she lived in as a little kid. And now, he's getting ready to kick out 800 Liberians. She's been in this country for 20 plus years. The Haitians that are being kicked out.
Wow.
First, wanted to let you know, since you're the chair of the Congressional Black Caucus, on your website, you click on my link, it doesn't go to the Black Caucus website, just so you know.
I'm sorry, say it again?
The Black Caucus web link, it doesn't go to the website, just so you know. The very first one. When I click on it, I'm on her website. Just so you know. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, just so you know. And then second, can you talk about things that are coming down the line as far as it relates to the Judiciary Committee? Like, what should we be kind of knowing that's happening, or what should be in our forefront?
Well, on judiciary.
I'm talking about her experience on the Judiciary Committee.
You said what's coming down the pipe in terms of judiciary. Well, in judiciary, I mean, there's going to continue to be the oversight and the investigations of the administration. And so I know we're going to look at emoluments. I know we're going to look at conflict of interest, corruption. I mean, you can go on and on. But we have hired two attorneys.
So maybe we bring it down to focus to the Black community.
Well, to the Black community, my specific subcommittee. So I chair the subcommittee on Africa and foreign affairs, but I'm on Judish, and in Judish I chair the crime subcommittee. So criminal justice reform. Voting rights also is going to come through Judish as well. So the voting, that we introduced legislation the other day to reauthorize the Voting Rights Act. That will get a hearing in judiciary. Criminal justice reform. My focus on criminal justice reform is going to be gender specific, because primarily when you're talking about criminal justice reform, you're talking about men and you're not talking about children. And so women and children is going to be my personal focus. Everybody, people are focusing on a lot of different things, but that specifically happens to us.
Okay, let's stop at the last question. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah. I assume you expect a fight from the administration against all of the investigations. How vicious do you anticipate that resistance to be and the fight to be?
Well, I don't think that he has any regard for the rule of law.
Right.
So there you have it. Seriously, because I don't know what he's going to do when he gets subpoenaed. That's what I was saying a few minutes ago, that I don't think he's clear on what is getting ready to happen. That he doesn't quite know, he certainly doesn't know what to do with Speaker Pelosi. That's been hilarious to watch.
Yes.
I served in that role in California. I was Speaker when Arnold Schwarzenegger was our governor, so I have flashbacks watching Pelosi deal with him. But I imagine that he's not going to cooperate. He's not going to let people from his administration come. We're going to subpoena, and he's going to ignore the subpoenas. Then we'll take him to court. But because he does not have a regard for the rule of law, I don't know what happens after that.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I think we got it.
My pleasure.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you guys for joining.
Here as the Vice President of Broadcast for NABJ. I wonder if you could tell us a little about what NABJ is up to these days that we should know about.
Okay, thanks for putting me on the spot. I think unless you've been, in a vacuum somewhere or had your head in the sand, you know that the organization, the office, has been very critical of CNN. We've probably seen the evil acts that have been out. So we are just really now, more than anything, focusing on all of the television stations, all of the networks. We're really pumping up the advocacy in terms of looking at African Americans in the upper management positions. The battle that we're now having with CNN is all about wanting the opportunity to sit down with CNN. We have already met with CBS last week. The week before that, we met with CNBC. On Friday, I'm back in New York to meet with NBC. After that, it's ABC. So it is, it is all about that push of saying that we recognize that there are African Americans in front of the camera, and we have been trying for a number of years to get them to recognize that we know it is much more important to have African Americans in management. Much more important than that. And a lot of times, if you saw Jeff Zucker's response, was that, we've got people in front of the camera, and yes, we need to do better. But we need to do better. It's something that we have heard for years. And this is really us just kind of turning up the heat. And that is our focus right now. Obviously, we are very eager about what's happening in Miami, and I can tell you that it is probably going to be one of the best attended conventions that we have had in a long time. You're going to see something a little different this year than you've seen in the past, because again, we're kind of looking at where we are and what other organizations are doing. So we're focusing more on hands-on kinds of workshops, not just the panels. So you're going to see a lot more of blah, blah, blah training, blah, blah, blah interactive. So, we're hoping that our members, we know that our members will enjoy that more. I can tell you we're probably going to have to add another hotel because we have 4 now, and we are just about to sell out of all of those. I would advise you, just a couple of things. You should check back with the main hotel, because what has happened is that a lot of our media partners were so excited, they tied up a lot of rooms. And now as they're beginning to say, well, we're not going to bring 50 people, we're only going to bring 40, we're not going to bring 80, we're only going to bring 60, keep calling the hotel back. Because I think some of those rooms are going to begin to free up if you want to be in the main hotel.
Okay, let me stop you right now.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, that's great, that's great.
Okay.
Mr. Congress has a couple more
I'm a
things.
television reporter. You tell me the time.
You didn't even want to get up.
That's right. And there's more, we'll go right back into it.
So I didn't want to leave here without actually talking to you for a few minutes about the way the Black Caucus does want to approach things over the next couple of years, and then to sincerely ask for your help. Number one, we will be there in support of what you're talking about.
We're looking forward to your letter.
Yeah, we're preparing a letter, and you should look at it before we send it, because you might want to
Absolutely, please.
help with us, so I'll make sure, you have the information so that we can send it to you. But one of the things that we're doing, and my request for help is for coverage, because one of the things that we find, and I know I enjoy the press, I'm a news junkie, I like doing it, but we can't get coverage. I mean, the TV, print is a little different, but not much. Because you call up and pitch stories and they won't put you on. I mean, they'll put on the same 5 white guys every single day. You would have no idea there's 55 members of Congress. And so what we plan to do is we plan to go in mass once a month to members' districts, and to have the community see us in our formal roles. So for example, just to use an example of LA, although in March 29th and 30th, we're going to be in Detroit. But to give you an example, in Los Angeles, I would chair in my official capacity, the crime subcommittee. People in the community would have an opportunity to see me chairing a committee with Republicans on the committee, non-African Americans on the committee. After that, CBC members will descend on Los Angeles en masse. We will meet with the local elected officials, local media, we'll meet with clergy, we'll do site visits, and then do a lot of social media and other media so that people across the country see us. But every month we want to be in a different geographic area, and maybe it won't be an area where there's a member of the Congressional Black Caucus, but there's a significant African American population.
Well, let me suggest
Yes.
that in every area that you go in, you make sure you reach out to one of our local chapters.
We will.
And so, because it's all about relationships.
Yes.
That if those congressional black members would, for an example, and I'm sure we'd be more than willing to do that in Chicago. We host something with you.
Yes.
So that we know our members in Chicago, and I'm sure that in all the other cities they do as well. But what I'm saying is that, just form a little bit of a tighter relationship so that they've got your cell phone number and you have theirs. So that when something is going on, a lot of times what we want is the first story.
Yes.
Break the story. So if you call us as opposed to calling the other people, you have a better chance.
See, I think that we should do weekly or every other week phone calls with you. You should know what is happening in Congress. We would like to do that. Well, we would very much like to do that. And see, an individual member, people know me in my area because I've been there my whole life. But they know me. They don't know the Congressional Black Caucus. And that's the reason why we want people to descend in mass on geographic areas. So in addition to seeing me in my formal role in Congress, they also will see me in my role in the Congressional Black Caucus, because by December 2020, we would like for people to not say, what does the Black Caucus do? The Black Caucus doesn't do anything, and the annual Black Caucus Week is just a party. That's the rep.
So
but it's true, isn't it?
It's true that they say that.
It is true.
I know it's not
But I'll take responsibility for our part of it, which means we need to be much more aggressive in being out there and have weekly calls and have your database. Gabriel is going to be the communication director. She will be in contact with you. But we would like to, if you're interested, a weekly call. You asked what was happening with judiciary. You should know that. Every week. But we're on every committee. I just mentioned the 5 committees that we're in charge of. But we can give you the inside story of what is going on, and we would like to have that kind of relationship with you. So I just wanted to ask for your help, and then I also wanted to say that we will be there to help you as well. So thank you very much for the opportunity to speak with you.
Great.
We're Detroit. I'll be in Detroit as it turns out.
Oh, you will be?
30th.
Okay.
So I can come to 29th, so I'll reach out to you and your team.
Great. Gabby, you can give her your...
You already here. Well, yeah. Well, all this, yeah. In the last note, I have everybody title, but I don't have the contact.
That would be great. Thank you.
Okay. Oh, wait. Hold on 1 second. Can I stop you for 1 minute?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yes.